Hi everyone, thanks for joining me again today. We're going to be delving into sort of part two of what we started discussing last week when we were talking about the importance of fall fishing and how great it can be for you. And we shared with you the reasons why that is. At that time of year, you created the most stable condition that the fish will have all year. Translation is you're able to catch a lot of really big fish at that time of year. Now, I'm going to tell you a couple of stories, just looking back on how this was really driven into my mind. I'm going to tell you a few stories going back with Buck that demonstrates to you how great this fishing can be in the fall months, all species and all different lake types. I remember sharing with you once that Buck took me to Grenada. This was their second trip to Grenada out in Mississippi. It's just a big old flatland reservoir that he liked fishing. And what he really liked was, like a lot of the old time reservoirs, what they did was they pulled it down in the fall. And this creates a good fishing situation, not only for that time or that moment in time, but over the course of the life of a reservoir. It's good for the reservoir, these drawdowns. A lot of the reservoirs today, they don't do that. But he liked going out there, and it was a good visual for me that I could see all these structures that were normally underwater but are now out of water. They literally pull that reservoir down like 50 feet, 60 feet. I think he told me one time they pulled it down 75 feet. So productive structure you could see leading out to the channel, nice bars and islands and humps, and road beds, you could see it all because it was out of water while we're there fishing. So he wanted to show that to me. I ended up about 5 years later going back, taking a camera and shooting a film of that, which is somewhere in our repertoire here on YouTube. So you should check that out, what structure really looks like. And I got my feet a little bit muddy, but it was a fun time. But more importantly, the second time I was there with Buck, about 3 years previous to when I shot that film, he said, "We're going to work on trolling today." He said, "I know you're a good troller. The last 2 years, you've really developed into a pretty good troller." He said, "But I want to make you a great troller because trolling is such an important part of overall fishing success. All species, all time of the year, all lake types or rivers. If you don't troll, you can never be a great fisherman. You have to cast, but you have to troll as well. And nobody," he said, I remember him, he was very vehement about this. He said, "Nobody teaches it." He said, "We teach it, but nobody else does. So you're the guy who's got to carry this torch about the importance of trolling. But it's not just important to tell people about it, you got to show them how to do it. In order to really be good at it, I want to make sure you're a great troller." When I talk about great, I'm talking about keeping a lure in total position 99.999% of the time. In other words, I want you to be precise in your trolling. So Buck said, "So Donnie boy, I brought you out here to Grenada because I wanted you to see all this structure that's normally underwater that now is out of water. I wanted you to get a good look. We're going to travel all around the reservoir and take a look at some of that stuff. I think it's important for you." Now keep in mind, he's grooming me at this point to take over when he retires from teaching the schools and doing the clinics. But he wanted to make sure that I knew what the heck I was talking about. So this was just another one of his little weekends that he had planned. And he said, and not only that, but we're going to spend 2 days on the riprap at the dam. Now, on the riprap at the dam, it's a pretty straight shot like most dams or most road beds or most causeways. You know, it's a straight shot. Normally, pretty easy trolling. But he said, we're going to do something different. He said, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be trolling this dam for 2 days. I thought, well, why would we need to troll it for 2 days? He said, I want you to become a great troller. And that means you have to be precise. You have to have precision in your trolling. Even guys that have been around this for a long time think they're good trollers. They're not. You have to be precise. You got to keep that lure behind the boat and on the exact spot where the fish are following. Whether it's a break line, whatever it is, you got to have your lure in position. So we're going to work on that. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I've been trolling now for a couple of years. I mean, you know, I know how to troll. He taught me that in the beginning. He said, no, we're going to fine tune it. I said, okay. How are we going to actually do that? Because they're pretty easy trolling passes on a straight dam, you know. And he said, well, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to put the depth sonder in the boat. And we're going to troll this thing. We're going to run through all of our lures. And we're going to troll this dam. And I don't want your lure to ever be out of position. And I don't want my lure to be out of position. I said, well, we don't have a meter. And, you know, how are we going to actually grade my job, so to speak? He said, that'll be easy. It'll be determined by how many fish we catch. Well, that also had something to do with are the fish going to be active and they can move. It wouldn't just be, you know, it was my lure in position. He said, no, we'll get the answers in a couple of days. Well, he already knew it's fall. He knew there'd be some fish in there. And the answer was that if I wasn't catching fish, then my lure was not in position. I mean, he was convinced of that. He knew that there were going to be fish in there. He'd experienced it before. So we started this trolling, and he said, now, you're going to be feeling the lure and making your boat adjustments, whether you're turning out, turning back in, based on what you're feeling with the lure. There's no depth sonder. We're not even going to put it in the boat. And we're going to contour these depths all the way down. Okay. So I started off in this weekend of trolling. And we made a pass all the way down the dam where I'm running the shallowest lure. The rocks are right here. I'm running a 500. He's running a 400 on the outside, a little bit deeper. So we're going down through there. I'm making my pass, feeling my lure. And when we got down to the end, and it's about a 3-mile run down there, 2.5, something like that. We got to the end, we're going to turn around and come back, but we're going to change lures. And he said, now, the lure on the inside, in this case, as we turn back around going this way, the lure on the inside is going to be his lure. He said, so now, I don't want you feeling and making your corrections based on your lure. I want you to base it on you watching my lure. So I had to watch his rod tip. By the way, when we do our first little on the water stuff, I'm going to talk to you about how you tell when it's free running, how you can tell when a lure is bumping. And we're going to go over all that. But I had to feed off of I'm looking up at his rod and watching it and making my boat corrections based on what his lure is telling me without me being able to feel it. But I could see it in the rod tip. Got down to the end of that pass, 2 different lures, turned around, contour up the other direction again. Now, over 2 days, I'm not kidding you, he was writing a story at the time for Fishing Facts magazine. And most of the time when we'd keep a stringer of fish or something like that, it would be because he had an upcoming story, he'd want a picture or two, you know. But most of the time when we're doing stuff like that, we're releasing everything we catch. We're not proving anything to anybody. He was just trying to make me, quote, a great troller. This was a weekend lesson. So, at any rate, we started down there in those first few trolling passes. I swear, we were catching a dozen fish, 14, 15 fish on every pass we made. And this is in the fall. And the average bass we were catching was 4.5 pounds. In the extreme shallows, 4 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet, strung along that dam. Big fish. Man, when I opened my eyes to all of that, all of a sudden it started hitting me. When he said the big fish, your best chance when a group of big fish get shallow or towards the shallows. See, most all the time, most all of the season, we're catching fish 15 feet, 17, 20, 25, 30, 35. And yeah, we're always checking the shallows, and most of the time you catch 1 or 2 or 3 of those before you get downstairs to where the big fish are. But now all of a sudden, We're running these small lures from 0 to 9 feet on this dam, and we catching bunches and bunches and bunches of fish, all in the 4.5, 5 pound class. Now, we released most all those fish. We didn't keep limits, but he kept 4 fish at the end of one day because he was writing a story for Fishing Facts. Here's a picture, buck there, 4 fish. But these fish were caught in 4 feet of water. It's everything that we talk against. But it's that one time a year when you can get really great movements of big fish to the shallow water. And keep in mind, we refer to shallows as 8 to 10 feet or less. Which brings me to the next story I want to tell you. Oh, let me finish Grenada. At the end of that trip, I think I mentioned this to you once before. I said to him, well, did I pass my weekend education? Did I get a passing grade? He said, I'd say so. He said, I told you we'd base it on whether or not we were catching fish. And he said, as far as I could tell, we caught somewhere around 250 or 300 bass 2 days. Yeah, and we did. And they were almost all jammed in there, shallower than 10 feet. Unbelievable. It was one of the most fun experiences I've ever had in the shallows. And it was all because of the fall movements. Now, in Florida, we talk about all the time about how, we don't have extremely deep water. We got pretty much shallow stuff. And during the summer months, you could be on a great lake and have a great break line, let's say, and all across the state, almost every good lake has a break line somewhere around 10 feet. Old lake levels, whatever it is. It's almost constant in every lake. Every structure fisherman who fishes down here already knows that. So keep in mind, 10 feet, you're right on the edge of shallows versus deep. And a bass doesn't know he's living in Florida. He's the same critter. He's reluctant to be that shallow during the bulk of the season. But in the fall, man, I'm telling you, things change a little bit. I'm going to get a little film and show you here over the next month or so. I'll shoot a little film, just show you what you can do in the fall in Florida. But I found this lake back in the day. This was in the late 70s. Found this lake in Florida. We were looking for a place to hold a winter school, someplace that was not run up and all heated up with a bunch of bass boats, casting the banks and so on and so forth, but had a lot of good deep stuff that you could work and you wouldn't be bothered. Some places sort of out of the way, but yet big enough to house a group of 30 or 40 fishermen each day. So I was searching. I found this lake in southern Florida, a little bit south. And I went out and fished it the first day. And my partner, Tommy, at the time, he was fishing another lake. We were in the same general area, but we're searching for a good lake. Well, that day, I caught so many big fish that literally I was shaken because these fish were in 9.5 feet of water. 9.5 foot break line breaking to 10.5. Boom. 9.5 feet, I'm catching these big fish. Now I'm talking, they were all between 5 and 9 pounds. And I caught maybe, that first day I probably caught 15 or 18 before I got off the water. Got a hold of my partner and I said, Tommy, we're going to fish this lake tomorrow. But I think what we need to do is we need to call Buck right away. Let him know that we found us a lake. And Tommy said, well, let's fish it tomorrow and see what we do. We weren't out there an hour and just killing big fish on short line, 200 spoon plugs, 10 feet of water, 9.5, 10. So we got off the water early and just raced in and called Buck and said, Buck, I don't care what you're doing. And by the way, folks, this was right before Thanksgiving. And I said, whatever you're doing, I want you to drop it right away. Get in your camper and bring your boat and drive down and meet us at this lake. Told him where we were. So sure enough, that night he packs up, he comes down. He was there first thing in the morning, daybreak. He was there at the boat ramp. And I said, Buck, you're not going to believe what we found. We found us a real fishing hole here. And it's minute break lines. I said, in one case, we have a 1/2 foot break line where we're catching a bunch of good fish yesterday. And I said, so I'm going to take, for a change, I'm taking you fishing today. You get in the front of the boat, and I'm going to take you fishing. And let's just see what we can find out today. I already knew. We had really found a fishing hole, and the weather was perfect. Stable weather, stable water. And keep in mind now, we're asking these big fish to come to 10 feet of water, which in the bulk of the season, they hardly ever will get that shallow. Hardly ever. That's why the guys beating the banks all the time hardly ever catch a stringer of big fish. They catch some little ones, occasionally a good one, but never a stringer. Never a bunch of them. So all of a sudden, we get out there and we start down there. Buck's in the front of the boat. And I told him on the first pass, I'm running a long line 250, about 16 layers of line. He's running a short line 200. By the way, I'm going to explain all that to you in a week or so. So we got 2 lures running like this on that break line. We weren't out there 10 minutes. He hits the first fish, 7 pounds. I hit the next fish, 10 pounds. He hits the next fish, about 7 or 8 pounds again. I hit another fish, a little guy, about 5.5. And by the time the day ended, we had, and Tommy was in another boat, but we literally had caught more than our limits of big bass. And because at the time I was writing for Fishing Facts, Buck was a Fishing Facts educational editor, so he was always writing stories. He had one every month. So you'd have to keep some fish from time to time and take some pictures to go along with your story. Otherwise, people don't believe what you're doing. It's just the way it is. So he said, we're going to keep a stringer of these big guys and get some pictures in the end. So we did. And I'm going to share this picture with you. I shared it with you before, but I didn't tell you the whole story. Now, the whole story is these fish were caught between 9.5 and 10 feet. Look at that stringer. It's over all of my years. It's the biggest stringer weight-wise that I've ever been associated with. And these fish were all caught between 9.5 and 10 feet, which, as you know, we qualify as the shallows. But it was Thanksgiving week. And in Florida, that's our Indian summer. That's our turnover time, where you're getting some 50 degrees at night maybe and 75, 80 during the day. We have the same thing happening here as you have up there. It's just a little bit later. I say up in where it did the summer schools, it was September. In Erie, Pennsylvania, where we did smallmouth stuff, October, Halloween. Down here in Florida, Thanksgiving. So here we are catching all these big fish. And because Buck was still writing for Fishing Facts and I was writing occasionally, he wanted to get a few pictures of this pig stringer, and it was a hog stringer of fish. We got back to the dock and we started pulling these fish apart for pictures. And he said, wait a minute. He said, I got to go in the camper and put a red shirt on. He said, I'm not going to miss taking pictures with these fish. And we had laying in front of us the biggest catch weight-wise of fish, of largemouth, that I'd ever been part of. And they all came from about 9.5 to 10 feet, which is phenomenal. You just don't see it. Even in Florida, you don't see it. Because the average fish in these pictures was 7, 8 pounds. And there was 2 or 3 over 10 and 2 were 11 pounders on one stringer. All caught in what we refer to as shallow water. Proof of the pudding. And from that time on, we used to hold schools down here in the winter, and we'd hold them in the month of November, always catching fish, lots and lots of big fish, because that's the time of the year when the big fish will get shallow. And it doesn't matter, northern pike, muskie. I showed you a film not too long ago, or a part of a film where I caught some big northern with an old friend. Johnny was with me up there. We went back in September just to see what the fall fishing would be like. And there was a hump in an area where we caught a lot of good northern pike deep, like 15-pounders, school fish, all summer long. We'd catch them. You could count on it. You go there, you're going to catch fish. We're down there at 35 feet, 45 feet. And I said, I'd like to check the shallowest section of this bar. It's actually kind of like a hump that has a little swag in towards the shore, and then it shallows up. I said, I want to check this area. And we were there for 3 or 4 days, I can't remember. And every day around noontime, those fish got active, and we're throwing into the cabbage weed behind this structure, connected to it, but in the shallow section. We're throwing big old suics, and he was throwing big spinner baits from time to time, anything that go through that cabbage weed really good. But the cabbage weed was dropping off about 13, 14 feet. And at the edge of those weeds, sometimes back in the weeds, man, those big old northern come up. And muskie, we caught 4 or 5 muskie that trip. But the northern, on one day, we caught 5 northern between 18 and 23 pounds. 5. Big hogs. At a spot where normally we're catching 15-pounders down in 35, 45 feet during the summer season. So whether it's northern pike, whether it's muskie, this is the time of the year where you should be thorough in checking the shallows. Structure is always going to be your guide, but you spend more time checking the shallowest sections of these structures during the fall months, and you're going to be surprised. It's the one time of the year where the big hogs can get in shallow because of the stable conditions of both weather and water. I'll leave you with one other picture which you've seen before, but it was just another example. Lake Erie, the water is so clear. I mean, it's like coming out of your tap clear. The fish are deep so often that it's very difficult fishing. If you're not working wire line 45, 60 feet of water, you're not catching much. But during the fall and up there, when all those trees get beautiful, I've had 3 occasions to be up there, and I had scheduled to go up there this October until I got hit with this medical thing. And I just 3 days ago called. I was meeting 3 friends up there, and we canceled. So I'm not going to be able to do it until next year. But I'm going to use this one little quick story I showed you in one of our vlogs about an uphill break line, which occurred in an unusual place, and it was in Lake Erie. And the fish moved, and this was fall now. This was Halloween week. They moved up this break line, and we were in an anchoring position, and we caught this stringer of fish. Now, when you first look at it, keep in mind, we don't hold fish out like this to bloat them up. We hold them under our chin. So what you're seeing is the real deal. And these fish, every fish, a 2-man stringer, were all caught in 17 feet of water. And they're between 5.5 and 6.5 pounds. 2 fish were over 6. Most of the fish were right at 5.5. Hogs in 17 feet, which in Lake Erie, that's shallow. That's shallow to get those big smallmouth. So again, there's just a few examples why, whatever you're doing, you got a good lake, go out there and fish it, even during the hunting season. And you're going to get surprised. I know I was. And today, without question, my favorite time of the year to fish is the fall. So, with all that being said, hopefully the next time we get together, I'll be out there on that boat. I'm going to promise you I'm going to try as much as I can to make that happen. But today, thanks again for being with me, and I want you to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, be sure to check out my blogs over there on the webpage. And if you haven't already subscribed to our channel here on YouTube, please do it. We need you. Would like to have you with us, be part of the team. And thanks again for being with me today, and we'll see you the next time.